Karin Keays, good to have you here at noise11.com, and a bit of a double banger interview because we have the Jim Keays album Caledonia to discuss.
Looks very good.
And we also have your book.
Oh my God.
Because
yes,
I love you to discuss, which I've had a crash course through overnight and got through most of the book. It's interesting with the album because the album opens with the song Waiting for the Big One. And the opening line of Waiting for the Big One is magazines and paperbacks. And, you know, here we are, you know, with your paperback. And that starts off talking about you and magazines. And
yes.
I think it was called Country Lifestyle magazine.
The English Country Life. It's an institution. I don't know. It might be over 100 years old.
And one of the writers in there that you were a big fan of that ceased to be a writer but then came back, but you made a connection with her in that time.
Yes, I did. So Carla Carlisle had the Spectator column at the very last page of the Country Life. So every Friday I'd go and get my Country Life, which coming from England would make it about, well, say 10 weeks out of date. So it'd be old news, but I didn't care. And I would sit down with a cup of tea, open it up to Carla's page at the back and read her well, in these days you'd probably call it a blog, but it's all online these days, but it's her column. And I loved the way she wrote. I loved the way she imparted just everyday things in her life and the life of a country manor in England and the farm and the vineyard that she had there. I just love the way she made small things seem interesting. So she was a big inspiration for me. What
I was very interested to discover, the song Because I Love You, the song title that you've named your book after, Master Apprentices song written by husband Jim Keays and Doug Ford, was a song that you only heard for the first time the day before you met Jim.
I know. I don't believe it now, but it's true. And it was almost like it was meant to be because when I met Jim, I had no preconceptions about him at all. I didn't know much about the song. I heard it the day before and I only really took any notice of it because it was on the Lee Jeans commercial in 1988. And the first time I saw it was the night before I arrived in Melbourne. So I'd driven down from the Gold Coast and I'd booked into a motel in Jerilderie and turned on the TV and I'd gone, Lee Jeans, oh, this must be the song that my friend Snezhana was talking about. So I listened to it. I thought, oh, it sounds nice. See, that's the first time I heard it.
And you really didn't know that much about Jim either, did you? In fact, you know, your meeting with Jim was as a landlord. He was to become the landlord more so than the famous rock star.
That is exactly right, because I was driving down from the Gold Coast where I'd been living with where I grew up, to meet up with my best friend, Snezhana, and our plan was to travel all together. So both Sagittarians, we love travel. And so we thought, well, we'll save up really hard, work really hard for 3 months, save up and start off with Japan and then head towards Europe. I just needed a place to live for those 3 months, somewhere sort of temporary. I didn't want to get a lease or anything like that. And she said, oh, I know this guy. He's a rock star. He's got a big house and he's Doncaster. I said, well, I've got my car. I need a garage for my car. It's a Gold Coast thing because when you're on the Gold Coast, the salt air gets to everything. If your car's not garage,
used to get rusty back in those days.
So, yeah, I needed a car for my garage, and I didn't realise that in Melbourne it wasn't such an issue. But yeah, anyhow, I needed a garage, and he had a double garage, so sounded perfect to me. So Snezhana arranged for us to meet up the night that I arrived, and we picked Jim up, picked Juno Roxas up on the way as well. And went out for a night on the town.
Did Jim look the part of a rock star when you met him?
No.
I was told by Tim Farriss once that if Michael Hutchence needed a carton of milk, he'd put on the leathers and the sunglasses and jump on a Harley just to go a few hundred metres down the road to the milk bar. Did Jim dress as the rock star?
Well, he did when he was going out, but by this stage he was about 40. And he told me that in the 70s, well before I ever knew or heard of him, that, he used to go, he hated the beach because he remembers walking down the beach in his full leathers, right? And he had to take his boots off to do it, and the sand between his toes made him really uncomfortable. He's sitting there in the sunshine, everybody's there in their bikinis, and he's sitting there in full leather. So he did do that, but he got over it. So by the time I met him, he answered the door and he had on slippers that were actually green pixie boots. It's the first thing I noticed about him when he opened the door. I'm looking down going, this guy's got green pixie boots on. So, what sort of a rock star are you?
He might have had pixie boots, but he never owned a washing machine until he met you.
He didn't. That's true. You did read it, didn't you? So I was his tenant. And then, after a few days, I said, well, okay, I need to do some washing. Where's the local laundromat? And he goes, so where's all your washing? And he started piling it into plastic bags, and he stripped the beds and all my clothes, all the towels, all his clothes, and piles of bags. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, okay, we're off to the laundromat. Get in the car, and he drives from East Doncaster all the way across town to Param, to Williams Road laundromat, and drops it in for a service wash. That's what he used to do. I've looked at him and I've said, you kidding? How much is this going to cost? He goes, $50. In 88, I thought that was just a huge, like a ridiculous waste of money.
Yeah,
and
$50 in 88 would have been a week's wage for many people.
Yes, exactly. I've got, you could get a washing machine here. You've got a beautiful laundry, because he had a beautiful new build. His house was brand spanking new. The laundry you could have a party in. I wish I had that laundry still. And, I said, you can put a washing machine in there quite cheaply if we get one on sale, and it's going to pay for itself very quickly. So he did. We went shopping for a washing machine, and I taught him how to use it. And he actually used to love doing the washing. He'd piled in, wash it, and then he'd go out in the backyard. Had a lovely clothesline out there too, and he'd peg it out in the sun, and it gave him actually a lot of satisfaction, I think.
So the book, Because I Love You, is not a Master's Apprentices biography. It's your story. It's a story of love and life and tragedy, extreme highs and extreme lows. But what I read mostly through the book is that you had a very normal marriage and lifestyle, living in the suburbs with the kids, and we get to the tragic bit as that goes along. But the initial part of becoming the wife of a rock star was that I guess that was just another occupation that Jim had, and he went off to work, and he happened to be a bit more famous than the guy who worked down the bank.
He was very much a homebody when he wasn't at work. He loved his home, his homes. He did little things like, I didn't even write in the book, how everywhere he went when he had a home, he always planted a daphne by the front door. Every house Jim Keays has ever owned will have a daphne, if it's still alive, by the front door. He was just he was a great husband, and he was very normal and down to earth. He wasn't a rock star at home, although sometimes if he came off a big tour, he could come home with a little bit of that attitude, but I could deal with that quite well. So,
yeah.
But no, I'm not in. I don't think, a healthy, loving marriage could survive 25 years if one of the people was acting like a rock star all the time.
The family started, first Holly, then Bonnie, and then William. And this is, where, for readers of the book, it's a very difficult read, because we can feel your pain when you discuss what happened to William. It must have been very difficult for you to write this, but at the same time, now you've told this story, you've got it out there in the world. Has that been a release for you as well? It's
like a little bit of a weight off my shoulders, because now I can sort of say, and I can refer to the book. So I do have things to say, just like Jim. If you hear about Jim's, listening to a lot of Jim's lyrics, there's a lot of social commentary or social comment in there. He had a real social conscience, and I do too. And so I see things that can be done better. And I feel it's a really good thing to be able to bring it out into the light so that people can read about it, recognise it, and just discuss it amongst themselves. I think that's the way to change. For myself, it was, I wrote all around that for years. I first started, I wrote like a thesis to the coroner, really. It was so many letters and so much information during the course of the inquest. Then I had all that, and then after that, I thought, maybe I want to write this down to share it with other people. So I started writing about all of that, just that. And I looked at it after a while and I thought, nobody's going to want to read this. Who's going to want to pick up a book and read this? It's too hard. And so, I'd put it down, come back to it for years, and I never really, then I decided to wrap it up in the story of my own life to make it more interesting for everybody. And plus, I don't think that I could tell the story of William, who was born of such great love, without talking about that love. He only lived for about 6.5 hours outside of the womb. But before that, he was part of our family from the moment he was conceived, and we talked to him about, we planned for him. He was part of our life, and he still is, and he always will be. So I wrote all around the actual birth for years. I couldn't go there. And then maybe about 3 years ago, I thought, this book's got to be finished. So I got into it, but it did take a lot of doing because there was a lot of toing and froing with the legals.
The questioning of authority. I think, one of the big lessons of going through this book is that people should question authority. Don't believe everything you've been told. That's pretty much what happened with William. I mean, you had an instinct to go a certain direction, but were advised not to. And, without saying too much and, allowing people to read the story. But questioning authority is part of the message that you are telling in this book.
Absolutely. It became very clear to me in the process afterwards when I did start questioning things that it was very quickly turned around to, well, you didn't have to do that. That was your choice. So, yes, technically it probably was. I was doing what my doctor advised was the best thing for the safety of my child. So, yes, without telling too much, yes, exactly. It's the questioning of authority and retaining our own sovereignty. I think it's very important. I gave away my own sovereignty there on that day. William paid the ultimate price for that. It's worth bearing in mind. Not always, obviously if I had my time again, I wouldn't do that. And I discussed that in the book as well, as you know, the what ifs. What if I hadn't done that? What might have happened?
This is a very difficult time for you. It must have been also very hard for Jim, who would then have to go out and stand up on stage and basically cover up all of his feelings and entertain people.
Yes, it was very difficult. And it's I don't believe it's any accident that he first started showing signs, although it wasn't diagnosed until 2007. But in 2004, he started not looking quite well to me. So, yeah, and I write about that in the book. I said it's time for you to go and have a bit of a medical checkup. And Jim was a non-medical person. He really, spent all his life avoiding doctors and going down the naturopathic route to health, and it stood him in good stead. But so he, in retrospect, I feel that the cancer started presenting itself probably within the year after William died, and I do believe that stress plays a huge part in the activation of cancer in our bodies.
Around this time, so Jim was now working with Daryl Cotton and Russell Morris, Cotton, Keays and Morris, which was a wonderfully successful trio and pretty much one of the early Australian supergroups.
Yes, absolutely. So the first gig after William died, they cancelled a few gigs, obviously. They just canned them. And then the first one that Jim went to do, and I can't off the top of my head recall which one that was, but Russell came round, picked Jim up took him to the gig. The first time I went to a gig after, and again, I can't remember which one that was, but I remember standing in the crowd, and then as the opening chords of Because I Love You came on, I just started crying. And I didn't know how I was ever, because we played it at William's funeral at Jim's request. That was the only song that he requested to be played at William's funeral. I won't give away its importance in our life yet, because otherwise I'll be giving away the whole book. But it is a very important song throughout the milestones of our lives. Yeah.
It was an interesting lineup with Daryl and Jim, because what I learned in the book was that the Masters and Zoot weren't exactly friendly with each other back in the day.
No, they weren't. They weren't. And Jim wrote about that in his book too, his Master's Voice, which, by the way, I'm looking to republish again next year. So that'll be out again. Yes, they apparently used to go to the VD clinics back then in the 60s, and they'd give their names. Masters Apprentices would say they were all the Zoot names, and the Zoot would say they were Masters Apprentices. They had a bit of a rivalry. They used to do things like, I think they used to sabotage each other on stage even, I believe. So, yeah, they weren't very, there was a bit of a, there's still a bit of a standoffishness between, Jim and Daryl, and I'm like, are you kidding? You guys, how old are you? Really? So, yeah, they overcame that. Again, I don't want to give away a cute little story in the book, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Zoot and Masters Apprentices shared a manager, Daryl Samble, who was also the manager of John Farnham. And
Correct.
The recent John Farnham movie and the upcoming John Farnham book doesn't paint a very nice picture of Daryl Samble. Did Jim have similar problems?
Yeah, he didn't have that. I haven't read John's book or seen that movie, so, but I have heard bits and pieces, so which are incredibly disturbing. So Jim didn't love him. No, he felt that Masters Apprentices were put on the back burner, and that everything was focused on Johnny Farnham's career as far as their manager was concerned. So that's why they got rid of him fairly quickly. They let him go and became self-managed. And that's how I think Glenn started, he really stepped up in that way. And that was that was definitely his arena. He was very good at that, obviously. And Jim too, he took over a lot of the management of Masters Apprentices and did for the rest of his life. Our company is called Masters Apprentices Proprietary Limited. It's a management company of all things Jim Keays and Masters Apprentices. So.
Yeah, and Glenn obviously, as we know, went on to manage John Farnham. So he was the heir apparent to Daryl Samble. Yeah.
Yes, huge.
Yeah. And another thing I did not know until I picked up your book, Brian Cadd wrote Elevator Driver.
Did you not know that?
I did not know that. The number of times Brian's been here for dinner and we're I did not know that.
It was called Silver People. And, I still have the handwritten lyrics.
There's something for the Australian Music Vault. As we also know, the Masters ARIA Hall of Fame statue is in the Australian Music Vault, and it's got a dent in it.
That's my fault. A couple of too many champagnes at the ARIA Awards, and we came out into the fresh air, and Jim asked me to hold the ARIA while he was signing autographs, and when we were going out, I thought, it's so shiny, and I was putting my fingerprints all over it. So I swiped a napkin, a serviette, and I thought, well, I'll wrap it in the serviette to stop myself from getting fingerprints all over it. And we walked out into the fresh air. I'm holding this ARIA, which is like a pyramid, and it's just slipped straight out of the serviette onto the blue stone gutter and glanced off my foot. So there's a ding in it.
I'll be heading over there later on this afternoon. I'll be looking for that ding. Now, the Caledonia album, which came out on Friday, the same day as your book, Because I Love You, why has it taken decades for this music service?
Well, Jim recorded it when into mid-2001, and I was heavily pregnant with Bonnie, and so she was born in September. And then he was working really full on with Cotton, Keays and Morris, as you know, and that led into 2002, which was the Long Way to the Top Stadium tour, which was bigger than Ben-Hur, huge. And that led into, and Cotton, Keays and Morris still working in between. Then it led into 2003 with the country tour, the regional tour, and then I was pregnant with William, and Jim's still working hard. William was born and passed away, and then our lives changed forever. And so Caledonia just sat there. Jim rated a few songs from it in 2006 for the acoustic album Resonator. He re-recorded them acoustically, so it's not the original recordings, but the album in its entirety was never released until now. It's just been sitting there.
And a beautiful version of Steve Winwood's Can't Find My Way Home.
It's stunning, isn't it? It really tears at the heartstrings.
Well, just, when I listen to that, I'm just, gobsmacked that, that has taken 20-something years for us to finally get to hear. So congratulations on getting it out for the world.
Thank you. And, the thing about it is that it just sounds so fresh still, doesn't it? It could have been recorded yesterday.
Oh, it's a timeless album, a timeless song, particularly. So the album Caledonia, I'm just juggling a little friend over here. So let me reach for your book, and there's the Karin Keays book. It's
there. It is.
So great to catch up and talk, and good to see you the other night. And
it was wonderful. Thanks for coming along. It's great to see you there too.
All right. Get the book, get the album, and the
DVD coming out as well.
Oh, DVD, yes, and the audio book. Okay, Winston says goodbye.
Bye, Winston. Bye, Paul.